How many times have you stopped to think if you are really under God's protection? Perhaps, in times of crisis, you have felt as if you were alone, facing challenges that seemed insurmountable. But what if I told you that there are clear signs that prove that God is watching over you, even when everything seems to fall apart? It may seem counterintuitive, but some of the situations that distress us most are actually direct manifestations of divine care. Have you ever faced an obstacle that turned out to be a blessing in disguise? Or did you realize that you were freed from something with no apparent explanation? These moments are not coincidences. They are signs that God is actively protecting, directing, and providing for you. And the most surprising, often we don't even realize it. Throughout this content, you will discover how to recognize these signs in your life and understand how they point to greater care, even in the midst of adversity. Ready to see your life with new eyes? Perhaps this is the time to realize that even in storms, God's peace, wisdom, and protection have never left you. Let's explore these 7 signs together. And who knows, maybe you will discover something about how much God is already working on your behalf. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns, and every turn brings with it a mystery. Imagine yourself driving on a deserted road when suddenly the car breaks down. An instant of despair, right? But behold, a mechanic appears out of nowhere, willing to help. This coincidence could easily be interpreted as luck, but those who see beyond see the hand of God. These situations show how, even in adversity, divine protection can manifest itself in surprising ways. Who has never felt an inexplicable relief after a turbulent day, as if a greater force was supporting us? It is as if, in the midst of chaos, an invisible hand guides our steps. Sometimes what we call a problem is actually an intervention to protect us. A cancelled flight may seem frustrating, but who can guarantee that it wasn't keeping us away from greater danger? Think of the story of a friend who was late for work because of traffic, only to find out that he escaped a serious accident. God works behind the scenes, using everyday situations to shape our lives. When something seemingly bad happens, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Where is God directing me? This simple exercise brings unexpected peace, transforming moments of crisis into opportunities for reflection. There is a powerful promise in Romans 8:28. All things work together for good to those who love God. Note that the verse does not promise the absence of problems, but the certainty that even difficult times have a purpose. Think of an artist sculpting a masterpiece. Each stroke of the chisel, however hard, is essential to reveal the beauty hidden in the stone. So are the crises in our lives. Each one further sculpts the character, faith, and discernment needed for the steps ahead. Anyone who has gone through a difficult loss and then seen unexpected doors open knows exactly what I'm talking about. It is not uncommon to feel lonely or disoriented when we face crises, but it is precisely in these moments that God sends us signs of His presence. These signs can come through a friend who calls at the right time, a message that feels written to you, or even silence that brings an inexplicable inner peace. Many report that when they read the Bible in times of difficulty, they find accurate answers to what they are experiencing. Try reading Psalm 91 when you feel afraid or insecure. This psalm is like a reminder that there is protection, even in the darkest nights. Unexpected encounters, abrupt changes, and even forced breaks in our routine are opportunities to see God at work. A simple delay in transportation can put you next to someone who needs a word of hope. Have you ever thought about it? Everything in our lives can have a greater purpose, even if we don't see it right away. The secret lies in cultivating faith and discernment to recognize God's provision in every detail. These interventions are like reminders that we are not alone in our journey. And believe me, when you start to see life from this perspective, something incredible happens. Daniel's story in the lion's hitch is a true testimony of how God acts in a concrete way to protect those who trust in him. Imagine the scene. A young man surrounded by hungry lions in a dark den, while enemies waited anxiously for his end. But divine intervention was clear. An angel was sent to shut the mouths of the lions, and Daniel remained unharmed. This narrative, described in Daniel 6:22, is not just an ancient account, it is a reminder that God remains our fortress in times of danger. Today, he can protect us in seemingly ordinary situations, such as avoiding a traffic accident or keeping us away from people who would bring problems into our lives. There are times when we don't even realize the magnitude of divine protection in our routine. Think about situations you faced and, looking back, realize that it could have been much worse. A last-minute change of plans, a delay, or even a rejection can be ways for God to deliver us from something we can't see. Proverbs 18:10 teaches us that the name of the Lord is a strong tower, the righteous run to it and are safe. This security goes beyond the physical. It also protects our minds and spirits in times of tribulation. God acts tangibly, even in situations of imminent danger. A practical example is when you feel a strong impulse to change course without understanding why, and soon after discover that that decision avoided a bigger problem. These moments are not just coincidences, they are the manifestation of care that often goes unnoticed. Think too of stories like that of Job, who even in the midst of the severest trial had God-imposed limits on what the enemy could do. The verses that relate this divine protection inspire us to trust even more. In Psalm 34:7 it is written, "The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them." That promise is as true today as it was in ancient times. That is why maintaining a life of prayer and devotion is essential. It is like raising a spiritual shield that protects us from the adversities of life. And it's not just about asking for protection, but also about being grateful for the security that we often don't even realize. God's action, however, is not limited to protecting. It also strengthens us to face what cannot be avoided. Just as Daniel faced the lion's pit with courage, we are called to trust God even when circumstances seem daunting. Psalm 91:11 reinforces that he will give orders to his angels to keep you in all your ways. And as we continue to be protected by that promise, there is something else he does, to guide our steps toward purpose, even in the midst of challenges. The story of Joseph in the book of Genesis is one of the most striking narratives about how God uses adverse situations to direct his children to the greater purpose. Imagine being betrayed by your own brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly accused. Still, Joseph kept his faith, and at Genesis 50:20 he declared, "You have meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." This verse is a powerful reminder that God transforms even the worst-case scenarios into something great, leading us as a wise guide along the path of life, even when all seems lost. How many times do we feel confused, not knowing what decision to make or where to go? It is in these moments that God silently guides our steps. Sometimes he uses unexpected changes or even waiting periods to put us in the right place. Think of a job opportunity that you missed, but that paved the way for something much better soon after. Psalm 37:23 says, "The steps of a good man are established by the Lord." This promise does not eliminate challenges, but it ensures that every step, even difficult ones, has a greater purpose. Just as Joseph trusted in the divine plan, we are called to do the same, even when we don't understand what is happening. A simple but powerful practice is to pray for direction daily. James 1:5 teaches us, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all liberally." This wisdom is not just intellectual, but a discernment that enables us to see beyond immediate circumstances. If you're in doubt about an important decision, take the time to listen for God's voice. Sometimes the answer comes in a subtle way, through wise advice or a feeling of peace in the midst of chaos. Joseph's trajectory also shows how God can use even the people who have hurt us to fulfill his plans in our lives. Joseph's brothers sold him out of envy, but years later he was responsible for saving the family from starvation. This teaches us that God is able to redeem even the most painful situations. In Proverbs 16:9 it is written, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps." This truth should bring comfort, because even when we don't see the future, he has already carefully prepared it. Divine direction is not always immediate or easy to understand. Joseph waited years to see the fulfillment of God's purpose, facing many adversities along the way, but each step was necessary to shape it and prepare it for what was to come. You may be in a phase that seems meaningless right now, but remember, God never wastes a moment. And while he guides our steps, he also provides us with protection and provision in times of scarcity, as we will see later. The story of the widow of Zarephath, described in 1 Kings 17:8-16, is one of the most beautiful demonstrations of God's provision in the midst of scarcity. During a severe drought, she was about to prepare her last meal for herself and her son, resigned to the idea that it would be her farewell. Then the prophet Elijah comes up with an astonishing instruction. Use what was left to make a loaf of bread and serve it first. His faith was tested to the extreme, but the result was extraordinary. The oil and flour did not run out, and she and her house were supported throughout the dry season. This story is a powerful reminder that God always takes care of his promises, even when resources seem to run out. Today, divine provision is not limited to supernatural miracles such as that of the widow. It manifests itself through unexpected opportunities, people who come into our lives at the right time, or even the wisdom to manage what little we have. Philippians 4:19 assures us, "My God will supply all your needs according to his riches in glory through Christ Jesus." But it is important to remember that trusting in God's provision requires active faith, a willingness to follow God's directions even when they do not make sense to us. A practical example of how we can apply this trust in God is in the way we handle our finances. When it seems like the money won't last until the end of the month, have you ever tried praying about how to manage it? Sometimes the answer comes in the form of creativity, such as finding a new source of income or rearranging priorities. Proverbs 3:5-6 directs us to trust in the Lord with all our hearts and not lean on our own understanding. This confidence is like a relief from daily worries, allowing us to see solutions where before we only saw problems. The miracle of the widow of Zarephath also teaches us that divine provision often comes through the other. Just as Elijah was an instrument of God for that family, we are also called to be channels of blessing for those around us. If you have resources left over, consider how you can help someone who is struggling. As 2 Corinthians 9:8 says, "And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things, you may abound to every good work." Generosity is a powerful way to reflect God's provision in our lives. When we understand that God owns everything, our perspective on financial adversity changes. Just as the widow had to trust before she saw the miracle, we often need to take steps of faith before witnessing God's provision in action. And it's not just about material sustenance, but also about the peace and security that comes from knowing that He is in control. As trust in Him grows, we realize that even in storms, His hand sustains us. Speaking of storms, there is something profoundly transformative about peace that only God can offer, even in the midst of the most turbulent times. The storms of life can hit us in unexpected ways, leaving us directionless and full of doubt. Imagine yourself in the boat with the disciples, braving raging waves, while Jesus slept peacefully. The account of Mark 4:35-41 presents us with a profoundly human moment. The terrified disciples questioned whether Jesus cared. When he arose and rebuked the wind and the sea, bringing immediate calm, he demonstrated that true peace does not depend on external circumstances, but on unshakable confidence in divine care. This narrative is an invitation to trust God even when everything around us seems out of control. In today's world, our storms can come in the form of financial crises, health problems, or frayed relationships. At times like these, it's natural to feel overwhelmed, but Philippians 4:7 reminds us that the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. This peace does not mean the absence of difficulties, but rather the presence of an internal security that only comes when we surrender our worries to God. Try stopping in the middle of a busy day and simply praying, "Lord, take care of this for me." Often, this delivery is what brings clarity and serenity. What makes this peace even more fascinating is that it can transform the way we face adversity. Think of someone you know who seems to remain calm even in the worst situations. This person has likely learned the secret of depending on God to find balance. Isaiah 26:3 gives us the key. You will keep in perfect peace him whose mind is set on you because he trusts in you. Keeping your focus on God, whether it's reading the Bible, listening to edifying music, or spending time in prayer, is a practical way to cultivate that tranquility. Sometimes what we need to experience peace is to remember that we are not alone in our battles. Just as the disciples had Jesus in the boat, we also have his presence with us today. Even when the storms seem endless, he is with us, offering direction and protection. Psalm 46:1 states, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble." This verse is like a reminder that we can run to him at any time and find shelter. As we learn to trust God during storms, something amazing happens. We begin to see his provision and protection in ways that once seemed impossible. This peace enables us to cope better with challenges and also to be a source of support for others. It's interesting how, even in the midst of chaos, God puts people in our path to strengthen us. And speaking of support, there is an essential aspect about the importance of community that transforms our faith journey. Human relationships are like bridges that God builds to help us through the most challenging times. A striking example in the Bible is the friendship between David and Jonathan, described in 1 Samuel 18:1-4. Even in a context of tension, with Jonathan's father, King Saul, wanting to kill David, their friendship remained solid. Jonathan risked everything to protect and support David, proving that God uses specific people to give us strength in difficult times. This story reminds us that in the journey of life, we do not have to walk alone. God surrounds us as strategic allies, whether in family, friends, or the faith community. In this day and age, a strong community can be the difference between despair and hope. Think about what it feels like to vent to someone who really understands what you're going through. Isn't it like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders? Hebrews 10:24-25 encourages us to cultivate these connections. Let us consider one another to incite to love and good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together. This meeting can be at a church, a support group, or even with friends who share your faith. The important thing is to keep these relationships that build alive. There are times when God uses unexpected people to support us. Maybe it's a coworker who offers sage advice, or even a stranger who shows up at just the right time. This type of intervention does not happen by chance. It is the hand of God, reminding us that He is present in every detail. Proverbs 27:17 says, "Just as iron sharpens iron, so a man sharpens his companion." That is why we should cherish those God places around us, being intentional in nurturing those relationships. Community also helps us grow spiritually. A prayer group, for example, can transform the way you face challenges. When we gather to seek God, something powerful happens. We find collective wisdom, encouragement, and a sense of belonging that strengthens our faith. If you're not already part of such a community, consider looking for one. Start small, perhaps by inviting a friend to pray with you or by attending an online Bible study. These simple steps can have a profound impact. In addition to receiving support, we are called to be support to others. Think about how Jonathan not only protected David, but also encouraged him to move forward. Similarly, God may be calling you to be a conduit of provision and peace in someone's life. By doing so, you not only strengthen your own faith, but also build bridges that reflect God's love. And as we learn to offer and receive support, we discover that divine wisdom is essential to guide our actions, as we will see below. The story of Solomon asking God for wisdom, recounted in 1 Kings 3:9-12, is a timeless example of how divine discernment can transform lives. Imagine being a young king, responsible for leading an entire nation with no experience or clear guidance. Instead of asking for riches or power, Solomon asked for wisdom to judge justly, and God gave it abundantly. This episode teaches us that godly wisdom is not only practical, but essential to face life's most challenging decisions. Likewise, every day we are called to seek this heavenly direction, whether in small or large choices. How many times do we find ourselves in a dilemma, not knowing which way to go? At such times, it's easy to get lost in conflicting opinions and advice, but James 1:5 encourages us, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives liberally to all and does not reproach." This request can be made in prayer with simple and sincere words. For example, if you're thinking about changing jobs or starting a new project, ask God to guide your heart and mind. Often, the answer will come as an inexplicable peace or a clear conviction about what to do. Wisdom also manifests itself in the way we deal with adversity. Think of the story of Joseph in Egypt, who knew how to use God-given insight to interpret dreams and plan for the years of famine, Genesis 41. He not only saved his family, but also an entire nation. Similarly, God gives us discernment to make decisions that benefit not only ourselves, but also those around us. This could mean adjusting your family budget to avoid debt or choosing the right words to resolve a conflict. Another fascinating aspect of divine wisdom is that it teaches us to act patiently. Often, we want immediate answers, but God works in His time. Proverbs 3:5-6 reminds us, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths." This means that even when we don't understand what's going on, we can trust that God is in control. Learning to wait on Him is a lesson in humility and faith. Finally, wisdom is a gift that God gives us to illuminate not only our own steps, but also those of others. Just as Solomon used his discernment to resolve the conflict between the two women claiming the same child, 1 Kings 3:16-28, we are called to bring light and righteousness where there is confusion. And as we learn to depend on this divine wisdom, we realize how it shapes our perspective, allowing us to see each challenge as an opportunity for transformation, something we will see in depth now. The life of the Apostle Paul is one of the most impressive stories of divine transformation in the Bible. Formerly known as Saul, he persecuted Christians with relentless zeal, believing he was doing God's work. However, on the road to Damascus, Paul had a direct encounter with Christ that completely changed his trajectory. Acts 9:1-19. From being a persecutor, he became the greatest missionary in Christian history. This transformation teaches us that no one is beyond the reach of God's grace. He can take even the darkest moments of our lives and use them to create something beautiful and powerful. Each of us faces moments of disruption where we are forced to confront our beliefs, habits, or fears. It can be an unexpected loss, a personal crisis, or even a sense of emptiness that leads us to seek something greater. Romans 12:2 guides us. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. This renewal begins when we allow God to work in our lives, shaping us through adversity. Think of how a caterpillar passes through the cocoon before it turns into a butterfly. The process is uncomfortable, but the result is glorious. A powerful practice to enable this transformation is prayer-guided self-reflection. Ask yourself, what does God want me to learn from this situation? Often he uses challenges to strengthen us and prepare us for something greater. Just as Paul faced persecution and hardship in his ministry, we too have experienced trials that test our faith. However, at 2 Corinthians 4:17, Paul reminds us, "For our light affliction for a moment produces for us an everlasting weight of glory, very fine." This verse invites us to look beyond the present and trust in God's greater plan. God also uses other people as instruments of transformation in our lives. Think of Ananias, who was sent to pray for Paul after his conversion. He could have refused, fearing Paul's past, but he chose to obey God and thus played a crucial role in the gospel story. In the same way, God puts people in our lives to teach us, encourage us, and even challenge us. Pay attention to the relationships around you. It could be that God is using someone to be a catalyst for change on your journey. As we embrace the transformations God brings about in us, we discover a greater purpose and a deeper faith. Every struggle, every loss, and every achievement becomes part of a testimony that can impact others. Paul's story teaches us that no one is perfect, but all are redeemable. And as we allow God to continue shaping us, we learn that His protection, direction, and provision accompany us at every turn. After all, transformation is just the beginning of a richer and more meaningful journey with Him. Now that you know the 7 clear signs that you are under God's protection, the question that remains is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you continue to let adversity cloud your vision? Or will you begin to see the details of the divine hand in your life? God is working toward you, watching over you, guiding your steps, and providing what you need. But have you given it space to realize it? Have you ever thought about how your life could be transformed if you applied these truths in your daily life? Perhaps it is time to strengthen your faith, adjust your choices, and seek more intentionally the peace and wisdom He offers. Take a moment and reflect. How can you connect even more with this divine care? And now I challenge you. Share in the comments which of these signs you have already recognized in your life, or which one you would like to notice more. Who knows? Maybe your experience inspires others. After all, we are a community of faith, and growing together is part of God's plan. Finally, if you want to continue learning and delving into this topic, be sure to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. Thus, you don't miss out on any content that can transform your perspective and bring even more direction and peace to your life. And remember, every step in your spiritual journey is a testimony that God is with you.